Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and the all of everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. You ready? This is your host, Miss La. Let's do this. What's happening, everyone? It is a gorgeous autumn day here in Brooklyn, New York City, and I am super excited to welcome Eva Clay to the Ignite Intimacy podcast. This is a super exciting conversation that we're going to be having today. It's all around the science of pleasure for hotter sex and deeper intimacy and pleasure technology. So very, very grateful to be with you here today on the line, Eva.
Yeah, me too. These are such exciting topics. Ooh, science turns me on.
I know. I love that because I've always kind of felt freaked out by science because I don't know, somewhere back in the tethers of my, the tethers and whatever of my life, I picked up a story that I wasn't smart. Book smart. I know I so see that story now and I'm like, story, you don't have a hold on me anymore. I can learn anything. And it was interesting because actually when I was in college, I did a music business management program at a small college in Buffalo, New York. And we did a sound recording class. And I was like, I am totally not going to get this. This is so not my thing. I do not have an engineer's brain. And I think I had the best grade in that class of all the musicians and people who've worked in studios and all that stuff. So their story. But I guess science, I've had that thing about science as well, Yeah,
I hear that from you and I hear that fairly often and particularly from women. And I want to say you don't even have to be smart to understand science and to let it really serve you in your life. And that's what I'm into is not just understanding the science, because ultimately, what does that do just to understand it? I like to transpose science into something that's practical and useful and actually betters our sex and intimacy.
Okay.
So I think we're going to get super hot and bothered during this talk.
Woohoo! Yes. So we were just chatting before we pressed record and I was trying to remember okay, who connected me to you? And I think it was Sierra Sullivan. Sierra and Rano, who we've had on the podcast a couple of times.
Yeah, I actually looked at your podcast webpage, which is fantastic. If you're out there listening and you haven't seen her webpage yet, go check it out because it's really beautiful.
Thank you.
But, I know pretty much all of the people you've been interviewing lately. They're all it kind of looks like my Facebook friends list. They're all good friends. So it could have been Destin. It could have been a lot of different people. So I'm happy to be included as part of the tribe,
awesome.
as the sexy tribe. Yeah, but it might have been Sarah and Rano, maybe.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. So if you haven't popped over, go check out igniteintimacy.com and check it out. And cool. So, I'm super grateful to have you on the line. We had another goddess powerhouse who has a science background and a PhD. Dr. Jana was on the podcast last January and we had a fascinating conversation. So this is super amazing. And we are going to dive into some very different topic areas here that kind of make this whole sexual discovery and intimacy discovery tangible. And it's cool because I was reading on your website, your bio, and you say something about how I've always been interested in sex, but more from what does it mean? Why am I attracted to this person and not that person? And what, just more of the foundational pieces that guide our attraction, our sexuality, our intimacy. So when did this kind of start bubbling up within you in your life?
It all started in fourth grade when I did a
lot started for me in fourth grade too, I'll have to say.
I know. I just remembered the other day in fourth grade, I did a big project, a year-long project on the brain. And I don't know how many fourth graders that are studying the brain. But, I can't explain
Not
why.
many.
I've just always been fascinated with the brain, and in particular brain science. And then I got really into like drawing on the right side of the brain. I remember when that book came out in the, maybe the 80s, 1980 or something. It's sort of a path. I think it's a karmic path. And then when I went into graduate school at UCLA to become a psychotherapist, I really got into behavioral science. And that led me then into mind-body science. So when I say quote unquote science, what I'm really teaching is mind-body science and how the body, how the soma interfaces with the psyche, and how the two are in constant conversation. And we now have so many great tools to map brain activity. And in the last 10 years, there's been just an explosion of information and research about the brain that is revolutionizing what we understand about human behavior and human connection.
Mm-hmm.
So in my personal story, I've been a psychotherapist for over 20 years, specializing in sexuality and relationships and in intimacy. And then roughly, about it's 8 years ago, maybe now, I went through divorce. And here I was like a sex and relationship therapist, and I was divorcing. And it put me into a real crisis in trying to understand my path. And am I really here to do this? Am I really any good at this? Because now what do I have to say? Going through divorce. I was married for almost a decade. And through that divorce, I really plunged myself into what I call a sexploration. I went for about a year in my life, like trying every kind of sexuality, sex act, sex paradigm out there. And at the end of it, I was desperately unfulfilled and unhappy. And after one particularly rowdy weekend at a sex party, I went into meditation in the woods, and I sat on a log, and I had a spiritual awakening. And it was a flash of lightning, and a voice came to me, and this voice said, "Stop it. You're not on your path, and what you're doing is not befitting a queen." And from that moment forward, I went into a year of celibacy, and I began to study Tantra. So I've had many years now of in-depth tantric study and practice, and that's what I marry with the mind-body science. So I bring to you, convergence of science and spirituality, and I'm really finding that there's a big hunger for this, for a translation between the esoteric and the practical.
I love that because like that's life, right? Like there's the physical, there's the tangible, like we can see it, we can feel it, we can hold it, and then there's everything else.
Right. And then there's the mystery.
Yeah.
Which is important also, because we talk about science. There's a common misperception that science demystifies the emotionality, the tonality, the passion and the poetry of love. And I disagree. I believe that science actually underscores it. It underscores the miracle of how we're actually built to love. And that there are so many things we cannot explain and will never be able to explain or measure or, figure out. We'll never figure it out. But science engages a part of our thinking. It engages a part of our awareness that simply, in my opinion, adds a whole lot of poetry to the experience of love.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Okay, so you were married for 10 years and something shifted in that relationship. It was like something was missing there. And then you went on this exploration, and like after you went out and tried all these different things, which is really interesting because that's why I started the podcast. Like I'm seeing some parallels in our stories, not the marriage part because I haven't been married and I haven't yet been in a 10-year relationship with anyone, but aside from like my daughter and my twin sister.
That counts.
It totally counts. Yeah. I was like, wait, I have some long-term relationships. But, I started this podcast during a 6-month phase that I had a man pause, which some men thought I said menopause. But anyways, I digress. So then
how about a man fast?
A man fast. I love that. Yeah. We could start a program. But, which is not, that
not
would be
not a bad idea, actually.
That would actually be a good idea. We'll talk about that offline.
Okay.
But so, I like this moment, I can see you having this like come to Mary moment, right? And you're like sitting on this rock and it's just like your soul is just like, hey there, like this is not befitting you, like this is really not your path. And that awakening, that like choice, 1 year of celibacy. I mean, that's powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was that like for you? Because, I had a challenging time with the 6 months.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd love to tell you all about this. And backing up a little bit, I also heard a question early on about my marriage. And I think this is good to mention because I know inevitably there will be listeners out there listening to this right now who are in this same situation. And that is, I had an incredible marriage for many years. We were truly soulmates and truly very well suited for each other and had a fantastic, fantastic time. And then all of a sudden I lost my libido. I literally, like, my husband is incredibly gorgeous. I mean, he's like stunning and a wonderful lover. And I just suddenly completely shut down to him sexually and I couldn't get my libido back. And here I was a sex therapist and I couldn't figure it out.
Oh my gosh.
I did everything under the sun. I went to doctors, had hormone tests. I took supplements. I worked with my diet. We went to therapy, like for years, went to therapy to try to figure out why I don't want to have sex with him. And this was ultimately the big reason, the big undermine of our marriage. And there were, other reasons. But of course, when you're shut down that way, there's a ripple effect. So, and he is not one to have a sexless marriage. It's not going to work for him. And so, we divorced, we separated, and my libido came back. It was like magic.
Wow.
It's like, as soon as, that we were completely separated and things were legitimate, it was like I just couldn't get enough sex.
Wow.
So trying to answer that question of what the hell happened, what was it about this particular relationship that suspended my sex drive, my interest in sex? What was it about me and my psychology and my attachment system and my mechanisms? So here was this big mystery to unravel. And I believe that, the universe often works this way, that when we're a teacher or a healer, we're handed a mystery and kind of like God gives us a Rubik's Cube and says, here's a problem. When you figure it out, you'll be teaching the answer. And that's what I got. And I totally devoted myself to that path. And in the beginning, I believed that path was polyamory, sort of sexual boundarylessness to try and understand my sexuality and what made it tick. And then ultimately what I got was that was actually distracting me from my answer. It was taking me off of my quest of self-inquiry. And so going into a year of celibacy really helped me to start untangling the riddle. And yes, at first it was challenging, but it also felt so right. And, you might have experienced this, Laura, and anyone else who's listening, of after a couple of months, it gets a lot easier. It's like any other kind of fast. If you've quit sugar or tobacco or alcohol or something, the cravings do begin to subside. But for me, I found the craving was more for romance and emotional intensity, even more so than sex or see. And I was so committed to my tantric path that I was actually beginning to recirculate my sexual energy. And to be quite honest with you, I got a lot done. It was a very productive time in my life where I built a business and started a new brand and built a website and, all sort of launched a new chapter of my life because of that.
Wow.
Yeah. And then when it came time, when I felt ready to date again, I did so in a very discerning way. And it really reset my relational patterns. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, the reality is most people are never going to take that time in this life, right? That's a big commitment. That's that's a courageous path to take, because I see so many people just literally living and dying in unhappy relationships that don't meet what that person desires or who that person is or whatever the case may be. And that was one of the other reasons why I started this podcast. Cause I was really getting tired of married men and men who were engaged in long-term relationships coming to me to get things met that they couldn't get in their relationship, and that they weren't courageous enough to have a conversation about or to make a move, so that they could open up and have transparency and actually start to get those needs met. So yeah, so that is really powerful. And so how long ago was this 1 year journey of celibacy?
I'm so bad with time. Let's see. What are we now? 2017?
Mm-hmm.
It was, it starts going faster as you age. I think it was like 2007 to 2008, 2008 to 2009, around there.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So that's that's almost 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then, so what has occurred for you? I'm thinking about these terms, the science of pleasure for hotter sex and deeper intimacy, and pleasure technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk about that. And there's a beautiful way, like I can weave my story through, I can create a bridge around this. So most people come to me for coaching or for therapy or education with a story like this, which was very much like my story in my marriage. We've lost our sexual attraction for each other. Either the woman or the man or one of the partners in the relationship says, I just don't feel like having sex. I've lost my sex drive altogether. And it's not nutritional. It's not hormonal. There's something psychologically going on with me. Or they say their sex is unfulfilling. So there's some kind of dissatisfaction in their sex lives. And, this is similar also, and this is another bridge I'll build around the guys who have come to you because they're in unsatisfying relationships. Most people don't understand that the ground floor of healthy, passionate, exciting sex is empathy. Now, Brené Brown, I'm so excited about her work because she's really brought the conversation of empathy into the mainstream. And she's sort of she's a sister to me. Like I should go meet her and say, we should be friends because we think very similarly. We have similar backgrounds.
I support that.
Yeah. I was like, we should be friends. And this is why and how empathy is the basis of good sex. Because I'm going to shortcut some science here. So we're tribal creatures, right? We're wired to live interdependently. We don't survive well on our own. We have a very poor set of defense mechanisms. For example, we don't fly, we don't run fast, we don't have fur or feathers or wings and scales. What we have is our intelligence, our hands and fingers, the ability to make tools, and we have our ability to collaborate. So this actually helps us to survive. And why that's important to know is because we are wired for empathy. Mother Nature wants us living together in tribal units because we survive. So in order to make us stay connected, we have a whole set of involuntary mechanisms in our brain and in our nervous system that empathize with one another when we come into connection. Meaning you begin to feel what they feel what you feel. So here's an example. You're living in a clan or a tribe, and one of your clan members or one of your family gets sick. Why would you care for that person? Is because on some level you feel their pain. You feel their sickness. And you feel compassion for them because you empathize with what they're going through. So you tend to that person until they're well. So it's important that we feel on some level vicariously what other people are feeling. And now nature in her infinite intelligence has wired in an automated reward system for when we empathize. So when we empathize with somebody, our brain goes into mirror neuron activity. So our nervous systems actually begin to move into a sync with one another. So your heart rate, your breathing, your blood pressure begins to influence mine. In heart math, they call this coherence.
Wow.
And this is something we're mapping more and more. And this is what I mean by the miracle of science. It's like the mystery of science. It's like, I'm getting goosebumps even talking about it. I've explained it 100 times, but it's so fucking cool to me. Then we actually go into what's called a limbic resonance. So our brain, the limbic system, which is the center of our emotions and our nervous system and all of our autonomic functions like our heart rate, our breathing, our blood pressure, begin to join. And so when we move into limbic resonance, the brain begins to release all kinds of feel-good chemicals. The brain releases oxytocin, which we know is responsible for feelings of love and bonding and connection. Brain releases endorphins, which promote a feeling of wellness and happiness. We also get a shot of opioids, which is responsible for feelings of bliss, and particularly spiritual bliss. So we start to feel high when we're in empathic connection with someone. And this is nature's way of saying, yes, do that. Do that more. You get and dopamine, like you get all these reward chemicals. Nature wants us bonded. Now, if you're having sex without that bond, if for whatever reason you've lost that empathic bond through things that were never said, through old stored resentments, through feeling of contraction that you don't want to be seen by your partner because 1, you're hiding secrets. 2, you don't feel good about yourself. 3, you don't feel good about the way your body looks. Any number of reasons why we might emotionally turn away from a partner and yet still have sex with them. If you're having sex without the empathic bond, it's only going to feel half as good. If you're having sex with this empathic bond in place, then you have all of these feel-good neurochemicals and Mother Nature rooting for you on your side. So your foreplay, your sexual arousal system, and your orgasm is going to be accelerated. It's going to be amplified. Now, a lot of people confuse this. I want to create a really important distinction because I can read the minds of your listeners already. I've taught this enough times, so I know the rebuttal. The rebuttal is, but why are one night stands so exciting? Like, why is random sex in the airport bathroom exciting? And it is exciting. That's because we have the novelty factor in place. So anytime that we bring adrenaline into our sexuality, adrenaline either through danger sex, like sex in public places, forbidden sex when you know you shouldn't be having sex, or when it's novel, meaning it's a new person. We're getting adrenaline into the chemical cocktail, the sexual cocktail, and it gives us a kind of rush, like a peak experience. And when adrenaline is incorporated into this chemical cocktail, it becomes addictive. So when there's adrenaline instead of oxytocin, this rush, this spike becomes addictive in that every time you have sex, you need something more extreme and more extreme and more extreme.
Is this an issue with the physicality of how porn impacts you? Okay. Absolutely.
Now, what's interesting is that when oxytocin is one of the ingredients in your sexual chemical cocktail, I like to think of this as like a fabulous mixed drink, like a blue martini or something really fancy with an umbrella, and this is your sexual cocktail. When oxytocin is introduced, oxytocin acts as like, this is a metaphor, acts as like a blanket that wraps around all of these feel-good chemicals and makes them non-addictive. When there's no oxytocin present, and you add adrenaline to the mix, it's like sexual crack, sexual heroin.
Wow.
It's almost immediately addictive. So you keep needing these extreme experiences that produce more adrenaline. Otherwise, we start to get bored, we get disenchanted, we're not having anything novel anymore. I work with a lot of couples who come to me and they're like, well, the sex is not exciting anymore. I'm not attracted to him because it's not exciting anymore. So when a couple tells me that, I get really happy and excited because there's so much we can do with them to support them in bringing the excitement back into sex. But generally, I think as a society, this is kind of talking about the masses, we are so blown out on adrenaline. I don't even know, and free internet pornography has completely distorted the landscape of modern sexuality, truly. Back to limbic resonance and empathy. Empathy is the hottest thing you can do for your love life. Here's how. If you look into somebody's eyes without looking away for more than 20 seconds, you go into involuntary nervous system sync.
That's awesome.
Awesome. So simply looking into somebody's eyes, feeling your breath and not looking away, your bodies begin to synchronize. And you then will be the lucky recipient of all kinds of great neurochemicals, all the ones that I mentioned, oxytocin, endorphins, opioids, and you'll start to feel the sensation of bliss. So very simple ritual before you go into lovemaking experience with someone, whether it be a new partner or someone you've been with a long time, simply sit across from them for, a minute. Let's say set a timer for a minute. And if you begin to synchronize your breath as well, your in-breath and your out-breath, the inhales and the exhales for 1 minute, your sex is going to be like 10 times more exciting. And this is just a chemical reality.
Okay. That's awesome. And so how many minutes do you suggest?
Well, the science says 20 seconds.
Okay.
Okay. But I like to suggest if you're new to this practice, 20 seconds is an agonizing amount of time to look into somebody's eyes. If you're not accustomed to that, start with 20 seconds and time it. Go to 1 minute. I like to do it for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes because, my body is now regulated. My nervous system is regulated to this, and I'll drop into that bliss space within a minute, and I can just float there in this bliss, which, by the way, if you can allow yourself to float in a bliss space with somebody, and what bliss space means is limbic resonance. Means that your bodies are tuning to each other, and Mother Nature, remember, is rewarding you for that by giving you all these feel-good chemicals. All of these feel-good chemicals do incredible things for your body. They improve your immunity. They destroy cancer and tumors. These neurochemicals improve neurotransmitter activity, so you feel less depressed and less anxious. They improve muscle mass. You regulate your metabolism through these chemicals, so you lose weight faster or gain weight faster. So it, on every level, mind, body, spirit, this is nourishment. It's like a vitamin for your body. Your daily empathy vitamin, vitamin E.
Wow. I love this.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm just like totally blown away right here. Because it's so cool to like go into the actual science of this stuff and understand like how the brain works and how the body works. And like, for me, it's like, first of all, these days, I don't really find one night stands very exciting anymore. And maybe it's just that I really haven't had many one night stands in the last several years. Partly because I realized that my connection with people, my sexual connection with people, is so much greater when I actually have more of a foundation for it first.
Now, I was actually listening to the podcast with Rano and Sierra, and I think you said something similar there.
Mm-hmm. I did.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I don't want to say here's why, but I want to just say that you're not alone, and a lot of women feel this way, myself included. I recently relearned this. I won't give you the details, but I had, a brief sexual experience with someone that I really wasn't emotionally connected to. And God, man, I paid the price for that. It ended up not being good for my heart. But what happens for women is that, so whenever we interface with somebody, I'm going to make it sort of heteronormative just for the purposes of this conversation. Okay. So let's say you're interfacing with a man, and immediately our hormones begin to have a conversation. Mm-hmm. So his testosterone is conversing with your estrogen. And like there's a whole other level of consciousness that's happening that we're just beginning to really understand and map. And that is the transmission of pheromones and hormones. So we know that our consciousness is talking. We know that our brains are beginning to sync. We know that our bodies are talking to each other through body language, and we're unconsciously picking up signals there. But we're just beginning to understand the chemical conversation that's going on. So when you feel a quote unquote heart connection with somebody, what that means is that your estrogen is being stimulated. Estrogen's part of it, the function of estrogen is to put us in touch with our feelings. And this is because women bear children and nurse children and nurture children. So we need to be aware of our feelings and aware of the child's feelings. Mm-hmm. So estrogen is like a feeling drug. Testosterone is a non-feeling drug because men need to be able to kill the prey, go on the hunt, go to the war, fight the enemy. And if they were wandering around feeling everything all the time, they wouldn't be effective warriors. So for women, our sexual arousal system is totally connected to our estrogen and to our emotional body. Here's why. Let's say we were running around the tribe, the hunter and gatherer. We're running around the tribe having sex with all the men who came through the tribe. Not only the ones in our tribe, but the ones who were coming through, and all the men we were attracted to and all the men we wanted to have sex with. And then we didn't have any bond with them. And maybe we ran off into the wild, or we ran off into another tribe, and we didn't have empathy and empathic connection. It would seriously threaten the chances of our offspring's survival.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that women are not inherently polyamorous or, any of that. Maybe we are. I don't know. But certainly I believe women should and could have sex with anyone they want. But if we weren't having emotional bonds with these men and we became pregnant and we then didn't have protection and provision when we became vulnerable, our species would be in trouble.
Mm.
Nature wants a woman to feel bonded with her partner or potential partners in case she becomes pregnant from that encounter. And now she will have less of a need to bond with that partner or potential partner if she feels strongly bonded to other members of her tribe. So I find in my practice, there's a direct correlation. Women who are able to have casual sex and enjoy casual sex without any need or necessity for ongoing contact with that sexual partner tend to have, this is not across the board, of course there are exceptions, but they tend to have very strong social systems that support them. So they have strong friends groups, they're part of communities, they feel an association to a particular group. Let's say it's Burning Man, or let's say it's their church. Probably not their church, but it's something, sex positive communities or their high school friends or something.
Yeah.
When women have less social connection, they tend to have a higher degree of need, emotional need, and a need to pair bond with their sexual partners. And this is nature's way of making sure their children and the woman are cared for. Does that make sense?
It totally does.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, anyways, keep going. I'm like totally like high on this conversation right now. I'm just like, I'm riding the wave with you.
So here's why that's good to know. Let's talk about the modern woman. So we're talking about the tribal woman, the cave woman, which we're not so different, really not different at all. Our DNA hasn't evolved in something like 40,000 years is what they estimate.
Wow.
Right? So
yikes.
and yet look at our society, how rapidly that's evolving. So we are like cave people living in these modern times, which is interesting. So
that kind of makes sense.
It totally makes sense. Yeah. So when we understand like how we're wired evolutionarily to survive in particular circumstances, and yet we're living in a culture and society that is so different from how we're wired to be living, some of this can be really useful to know. So let's say you're a woman and you want to have casual sex and not get attached. A lot of women come to me. This tends to be like the holy grail of female sexuality. It's like,
yes.
How do I have hot, amazing sex and not go fucking crazy afterwards? And when we understand, so we can map what are the things that your nervous system and your hormonal functioning is really needing in order to feel secure after a casual encounter. We need to feel safe. We need to feel protected. We need to feel belonging. We need to feel a part of something larger than just ourselves that will support us unconditionally and in the long run, like family. We also need a lot of care and nurturance, so self-care is important. We also need the ability to not make a story out of the encounter.
Ooh,
here's what I mean.
Oh yeah, that's good.
That's juicy. Yeah.
Yes, please. Would you please tell me how to not do that?
All right. Yeah. So our hormones are so powerful. Estrogen, oxytocin, so powerful that they create our reality. They shape our reality. And it's nature's way of trying to shape our thinking towards what perpetuates the species. What perpetuates the species for women is to pair bond with the father of their child. And we look at 1 to 2 years is really what a woman needs to gestate, to give birth, and then to get through breastfeeding. And then after that time, according to nature, you can move on and have another partner.
That's interesting. That is very interesting because when I had my daughter, I was 20 and I've told so many moms this, it was when she was 2 was when I finally felt like I came back to myself.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
that's because nature's like, okay, she's good, get back out there, have another child, produce another offspring, same man, different man, doesn't matter.
Yeah, get back to work or like whatever it is.
Right. Get back to baby making.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Story. Our hormones make us create a story, a narrative of the meaning of the encounter. So for women, this is not as true for men, okay? So, but for women, we might think, oh my God, that was such an intense, deep experience. We must be soulmates. Or that was such passionate sex. Or he had sex with me so quickly, it must mean that he likes me. Or this must be real love. Or maybe he's the one. Or let's say he doesn't contact you for several days after the encounter. The story is often, I did something wrong. Why did he disappear? Mm. And that's because our estrogen is plummeting, our oxytocin is crashing, and our attachment system's getting activated if we don't have any contact with him after sex. So how I coach women is to understand the particular kind of lens that these hormones create for us, how they distort our perception, and to feel the feelings, but not believe the story that the mind wants to make of them. Mm-hmm. Now, the story is created from, I've mapped this, okay, so there's some very specific ingredients to the quote-unquote story. It's what needs are unfulfilled in our lives. What is our mythology about love and sex? Meaning, what do we believe? Should we get married and be happily ever after? Do we believe in the one? Is there a soulmate for us? Etc. Has to do with our family influence, how we're socialized to relate. Has to do with our media and our culture influence. And so, and other things as well, like past experiences, if there's trauma anywhere in the history, the state of the nervous system, if there's hypoarousal, hyperarousal, if you tend to be anxious or depressed. So all of these are confluences to the story. And often women will have a repeated story with many different encounters. And if you're listening to this, you might even check in with yourself, like, what's my default story about sex and love? A lot of us have a rejection story. Mm-hmm. I always get rejected by men. Why? Like, men always leave me. Why does that happen? Men always abandon me. Why does that happen? Men are never good enough for me. Why does that happen? We all have a story. So when we start to dismantle those stories and look instead at some of the science that underlies the story, then we're not victim to the story anymore. And we supersede, we transcend the story. So after a sexual encounter with somebody, and let's say it was particularly exciting and very erotic and deep and connected and juicy and passionate and totally fulfilling, what normally will happen is you'll have like a 24 to 48 hour grace period where your hormones are high, your dopamine's kicking, you feel invincible, you feel confident. And this is because of what I call the pleasure cocktail. Mm-hmm. So it's because of dopamine, opioids, endorphins, and oxytocin. When all of these chemicals are combined, they synergize and they make a woman feel invincible. So we're riding high on that for a couple of days. We might feel creative. We might feel extra energized. We don't care if he even ever calls us again because we're like, yeah, I'm juicy and I'm all juiced up. And then, dun, dun, dun. And then all of a sudden, we're like needy. We're like, wait a minute. Where'd he go? Wait, do I get that again? Is he coming back? Does he like me? Did I do something wrong? And all of this insecurity begins to set in. And T-minus 10, 9, 8, you'll start stalking his social media. Wait a minute. Where did he, wait, I haven't heard from him. Because remember, nature wants to compel you toward partnering with certain suitable sexual partners. If he's really pleased you, if you find him particularly pleasing, if he smells good, nature wants you pair bonded. So the good news.
Yes. There's good news. Thank you. Give it to us, Eva. Give us the good news.
The good news is just knowing this. So if you're riding high after an encounter, then you start to crash and you're needy and you're stalking the social media. Look, nature has what I call the obsession trigger in women. So women tend to obsess. We ruminate on things, especially men, much more so than men ruminate on us. We ruminate on men. And this is because, again, nature's like, if you're alone, you could be pregnant, lady. You better go find him. And if he's off in a neighboring village with another woman, if he's gone off to war, if he's out on a hunt and missing, you better go find him, because you could be carrying his baby. And you know what? You're going to need him to feed you and protect you, because if a lion approaches the village and you're 8 months pregnant, you're going to be the one eaten. So we have this trigger inside of us. Knowing this normalizes it for women.
Wow.
So you're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. Whatever's happened in your past, it may or may not have anything to do with this reflex in your brain. You probably will obsess on him for a while. It's okay. Write it out. Don't make a story out of it. Let it detox out of your body. It'll leave in a week or so. The other good news is that we can access very strategically supports in our environment that help us to like detox more quickly and to get over the crazy feeling, and nurture ourselves back into a state of equilibrium. So things that I already named this. Self-care, certainly massage is really good. Anytime you get touched is really great. It cleanses the adrenals and the nervous system. Getting support, being with friends, exercising, movement, engaging your intellect. So learning something new is a great thing to do right after a casual encounter. You're not wanting to create attachment. Is like learn something new. It occupies the focus of the brain.
And okay, so this is amazing. I'm just getting so much from this conversation. And I know my listeners are too, and I just can't wait to share this conversation with everyone because it is powerful. So I'm curious about a couple of different things, because I do want to understand, like, from the man's point of view, like, what is his experience? And then I have two other questions that I want to ask you with regards to this.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for asking me about the men. I love men so much. I love working with men. I just love men so much. So what's happening in the male reality? So I'm going to use the same example of, let's say you've had a casual encounter with somebody. Now, nature really has a sense of humor. So when a woman has sex, it increases her testosterone. When a man has sex, it lowers his testosterone. And testosterone, we could say, is the basis of manhood. It's like estrogen is the basis of womanhood. Testosterone is what makes a man feel like a man. And when his testosterone is lower, especially if he's ejaculated, he has like a retractory period. Okay. Like, so you know how the testes after ejaculation, the testes will actually begin to move and dance. Men do the same thing psychologically after they've ejaculated. And it's after they've had a sexual encounter with somebody else and they've ejaculated. So they need to go into a cave for 4 days until their testosterone levels reset. It takes 4 days for testosterone levels to rebuild. And now, things that increase a man's testosterone in his sense of himself is silence and solitude. Silence and solitude. So a lot of men will say, like, after they have a casual sexual encounter with a woman, they need to disappear for a couple of days, especially if it's been really good sex, because they don't feel like themselves. They feel like less of a man for a minute.
Wow.
And then after those 4 days and their testosterone resets, they're ready to come back. And that's when they feel like texting her again or seeing her again or seeing another woman, they're ready to get back in the saddle. But generally speaking, men are more likely to come into contact with women or to want to come into contact with women when they feel that they're in power and when they feel like they're in their masculinity, their masculine power. So, which is exactly the reverse of what women want. Like, we want a lot of attention and contact after sex. I'm constantly coaching men to do this, that after you've had a sexual encounter with a woman, shoot her a text the next day.
Oh, just thank you. Thank you. I'm like, it's so simple. It's so simple. It's like one text message would literally cut so much of the drama and the story out of the mix.
It changes your life, doesn't it?
Totally. And like, yep. Yeah, I went out with a guy the other night, and I've just had this experience with men, like ongoing experience with men, where we go out, we have a great time. Mostly we're not sexual because I'm in my 30s and now I just turned 40. It's like different than my 20s. Like my 20s, I was just like sharing left and right, you know, and in my 30s, I got a lot more selective about who I wanted to share my sexual energy with. But regardless, like whether it's like a sexual encounter or it's a date, I would say the majority of men do not reach out the next day. In my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that, okay, so, cause this leads into one of my questions. Cause I've noticed that this guy that I went out with the other night, like he reached out to me like after the date. And it was like, wow, this is different and awesome. And then he reached out to me the next day. You know, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, this is what I want more of, you know, cause we want to know that we matter and that like, it's great to like get some feedback and it's great to just be like, oh, you're still there. Great. Okay, cool. You know?
Exactly. And, you know, what's happening between men and women just from a chemical neurological perspective is that two things. Men, remember, will not feel like reaching out to you. They won't feel like connecting with you. Now, especially, this is exponentially true if there's been ejaculation during the date. If there hasn't been ejaculation during the date, you have much better chances of hearing from him quickly.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay. So don't let him come. Basically.
Oh, we're going to have fun with this.
And now, you know, for men, and I'm gonna make a little bit of a generalization. This is anecdotal, and this is also what the science is telling us. But of course, there are exceptions. Okay, so I know a lot of your listeners are going to go, "Wait a minute, that's not true for me." And I would say, I understand that, but in general, most men, again, they're not driven. They don't feel compelled to interface with you if they don't feel like they're their best, most powerful selves. And it's not because you're not good or they don't like you or you did something wrong. It's because they don't feel 100%. And so that's what the retraction is usually about, is that they need to rebuild and reset their inner chemistry. After a man ejaculates, his estrogen increases. So testosterone decreases, estrogen increases. And one of the primary functions of estrogen, remember I said this, is that it puts you in touch with your feelings. And whatever feelings that man is sitting on top of, he is repressing, he's avoiding, he's denying, he's minimizing. It could be about you or anything else from his childhood, from his last relationship. That dose of estrogen from your incredible lovemaking will put him in touch with all of those feelings. And that is the male version of feeling out of control or disempowered through the sexual process. He is now experiencing this crash of emotion. And it might be annoying. It might be overwhelming. He doesn't know what to do with it. He's got nowhere to go with it. The more emotionally mature he is, the more emotionally sophisticated he is. He'll have better tools for processing those emotions when they arrive. If he's less mature, if he's younger, or less emotionally intelligent, he won't know what to do with those feelings. And every time he interfaces with you, those feelings come back.
Wow.
So avoidance is a very common, like, survival strategy for men.
Mm-hmm.
This is how I coach women to understand that, because we tend to think, wait, it's about me. Wait, I did something wrong. I blah, blah, blah. It's my fault. So I think we need to meet in the middle.
Yes.
So I coach men to say, like, women are not crazy. We have this biological reality that makes us need connection after you've had sex with us. Or nature drives us to obsess, and nature drives us to turn our insecurities back at ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Send her a text the next day. It doesn't have to be a marriage proposal. It's just a thank you. It's just a thank you for last night. That was wonderful. You're amazing. Period. It changes our whole reality completely.
It's so simple. It's so simple.
It's so simple.
And so what I'm curious about, two things quickly before we wrap it up here, because this has been a powerful conversation, and I would actually love to bring you back. You've completely blown my heart and mind wide open, Eva. I'm just very, very grateful for you. So thank you. Thank you for this. So, okay. I have a couple of quick questions. So one is, like, how can you have a conversation with a man before you're sexual without it being totally awkward about the follow-up thing? Because I've actually started bringing this up to a lot of men, and where's your follow-up game? Like, do you have follow-up game? Do you not have follow-up game? Like, am I going to hear from you tomorrow? Am I never going to hear from you again? Like, because if you have no follow-up game, no way. Like, you will not happening. And I know that sounds abrasive and abrupt, and and that's not necessarily how I would put it to a man. But, how can you have this conversation? What could you say that just, like, lays the groundwork for, the next day? And is there anything you can say?
Absolutely. This is a great question. I just had this conversation with somebody. It worked really well. So, the thing is, men move away from anything that threatens their freedom, right? So right away when you say, hey, are you going to follow up, or else, because I'm not having sex with you. So when you say, what's your follow-up game? They begin to feel pressured and obligated. And what I would recommend instead is to say, what really helps me? It really makes me feel good if you would send a text and just check in with me tomorrow. That makes me feel so good and so complete with the experience.
Okay.
So more than it being a kind of interrogation or something that really puts them on the spot or creates force in the relationship, they're much more likely to respond to you if you tell them how it's going to make you feel if they send a simple text. And you can even make it playful if you present it playfully. Like, getting a text the next day really turns me on. And even just thinking about you sending that text tomorrow makes me hot.
Okay. I love that. Okay. And then I'm curious as far as, like, the scientific aspects. Like, I've heard different people say different things about, like, when you actually, as a woman, have someone putting themselves inside of you, like, what is that? How long does that bond actually exist? Like, is there technically, like, scientifically a bond beyond what we're talking about as far as, like, the hormonal bond, but, like, is there another type of bond that's created? Like, I've heard people say, like, their energy can stay in you for 7 years and, like, all these different things.
We don't know, and I see a lot of, like, pop science going around about this, like, everyone you have sex with stays in your body forever, that kind of thing. You carry the DNA of every man you've ever slept with. We have no scientific evidence for that. There are a lot of esoteric ideas about energy and about, courting with somebody, courting in their chakras, courting genitally with them. I have a personal practice that I uncord with every lover after the encounter. So I give them back their energy, their chakra centers. If I like them, I might keep one or two. Let's come back to this. Or sometimes I'll keep a heart cord, but not always. As far as I know, I would be interested if something surfaces, but we don't really know the science of penetration. And, there's unprotected penetration, protected penetration. To me, as, someone who teaches psychology and psychobiology, I'm more interested in the meaning we make of the experience. Mm-hmm. And it's the meaning we make of it that dictates the chemical cocktail.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so there might be an encounter where you feel like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That was gross. Forget it. Move on. I'm not, then you're not emotionally invested in the person. There are others where you are incredibly emotionally invested in the person.
Yeah.
And for women, it's all about context. Where are we in our lives? What's our relationship to the man we're making love with? What do we want in our lives? I think as a woman, you might agree, and any female listeners, that there are times in your life when you really, really, really want a partner and you're like hungry for deep intimacy. And so the men that you make love with during that period take on a different kind of meaning because you have this hunger for intimacy. Versus other times in your life when you're like, I don't even want a boyfriend. I just like, I might have sex with this person and like forget about him.
Yep.
So it's all about context.
Okay. Well, Eva, there is so much more to talk about here. This has been, honestly, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for everything that led you to where you are today and to this conversation and to sharing what you share. I feel like I have landed on a missing link that I have been searching for. And you have provided that today in this conversation. And I'm just totally blown away. I could burst into tears right now.
Awesome.
You are such a gift. Thank you so much. Okay. So how can people find you online?
Yeah, find me. Come talk to me. You can find me at evaclay.com, EVACLAY.com. And I have a free gift for all of your listeners. If you go to my website, you can get a free self-love and pleasure hypnosis.
Ooh. So what we'll do is we'll put the link in the show notes.
Okay.
So that people can get it there. But where on the website? Where should they go?
You'll see right in the header.
Okay.
As soon as you open the website. Yeah. And this is a hypnotic script. I'm sorry. I do hypnosis. And so I had music specially composed that respond to your heart center and then your sexual centers. So as you're listening to it, both are being stimulated. And so, using pleasure, the power of pleasure to really stimulate self-love. And it's good for men and for women.
Amazing. Okay, cool. So evaclay.com. That's EVACLAY.com. And social media, are you active Facebook and Instagram or anything? Okay.
Yep. Find me on Instagram at Eva Clay and also Facebook. Just plug in my name and you'll find me. Let's continue the conversation. Let's be friends.
Yes. Okay, cool. Well, Eva, thank you for blowing our hearts and minds wide open today and for bringing your sexual science into the mix on Ignite Intimacy. I really look forward to continuing to get to know you, and we'll have to hang out in Los Angeles and have you back on. So Ignite Intimacy, you heard it here. This is powerful. We want to know how this has impacted you, how it's impacting you. Please email us hello@igniteintimacy.com. And we will love it if you can leave us a rating and a review on iTunes, because that means that more people will have access to this podcast and know about it. And we're just so grateful for your listenership and for your being here with us energetically. So Ignite Intimacy, thank you so much. Eva Clay, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, my pleasure.
All right, we'll check you all on the next one. Stay blessed and ciao for now. Give thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out online at igniteintimacy.com. and subscribe to us on iTunes. Also, tell your friends all about it. This beautiful music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey, and this podcast is produced by yours truly, Miss La. Give thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.